The year is 1994. A German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt is standing on a dusty, rounded hilltop in southeastern Turkey. The hill is known to the locals as Göbekli Tepe Patlabed Hill. It is not, at first glance, impressive. It is a place scholars had dismissed decades earlier, believing it to be little more than a medieval Byzantine cemetery, its ground littered with broken gravestones. But Schmidt is not looking at the gravestones, he is looking at the hill itself. He is an expert on the Neolithic, and he sees what others missed. He sees the flint, the chippings, the sheer volume of worked stone scattered across the landscape. He sees the very top of a massive carved megalith just barely cresting the soil. And at that moment, Klaus Schmidt realizes two things. First, this is not a cemetery. And second, this is not a hill. It is a tomb. It is an artificial mountain, a 12,000-year-old secret, buried by the very hands that built it. When his team began to dig, the world tilted. They uncovered not just a few stones, but a vast, sophisticated complex of massive, T-shaped pillars, carved with breathtaking skill. The dating, confirmed by carbon-14, was not just old, it was impossible. The first structures at Göbekli Tepe were built around 9,500 BCE. This is not a date, it is a paradox. This makes it 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It is 7,000 years older than the first pyramids of Giza. It was built in a time when, we were taught, all of humanity consisted of small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers, living in crude shelters, incapable of such a feat. And yet, here it was, the world's first temple, its first cathedral in the desert. But this discovery, as world-changing as it was, only unearthed a deeper, more profound mystery. After 1,500 years of continuous worship, around 8,000 BCE, the creators of this site did something inexplicable. They deliberately and meticulously buried their entire creation. They backfilled their temples with millions of tons of earth, animal bones, and stone tools, entombing their gods and hiding their world from the future. This was not a collapse, it was an intentional erasure. How did a society of primitive hunter-gatherers build a 50-ton monument to the gods? And why, after 15 centuries, did they decide, as one, to turn their backs and bury their world forever in the dark? To understand the burial, we must first understand the creators. The excavation of Göbekli Tepe is not just an archaeological dig. It is the rewriting of the human story. The narrative we all learned was simple. First, humanity invented agriculture. This led to food surplus, which allowed people to settle in villages. These villages became cities. And only then, with the safety of walls and the luxury of time, did humanity develop complex society, organized religion, and monumental art. Göbekli Tepe proved this timeline is catastrophically wrong. The people who built this monument were not farmers. Analysis of the site shows no sign of domesticated plants or animals. The bones are all of wild game, gazelle, boar, wild ass. The plant remains are wild wheats and barleys. These were hunter-gatherers, and yet the site is a masterpiece of engineering. The complex consists of multiple, circular enclosures, some 65 feet across. At the center of each are two massive T-shaped pillars, weighing 10 to 20 tons, some reaching 18 feet in height. These are not crude slabs. They are stylized human figures, their arms and hands carved in low relief, their bodies draped in loincloths. They are silent, headless giants, staring not outward at their worshippers, but inward at each other, forever locked in a secret communion. The pillars are a Stone Age zoo, a catalog of a lost spiritual world. They are covered in high-relief carvings of terrifying power, snarling lions, leaping foxes, venomous spiders, and most frequently, vultures and scorpions. This is not a home. There are no hearths, no houses, no permanent water source. This was a church. This is the first revolution of Göbekli Tepe. It suggests that organized religion, the shared idea, is what came first. The old narrative was farming is greater than cities, is greater than religion. The new narrative is religion is greater than cities, is greater than farming. This leads us to the first great theory, the one held by Schmidt himself, the first temple, This theory argues that Göbekli Tepe was a regional pilgrimage site, a mountain sanctuary for nomadic tribes across the Fertile Crescent. The sheer staggering amount of labor required to build it, to quarry 50-ton stones and move them without wheels or pack animals would have required a massive coordinated workforce. This act of building, this shared project, is what bonded them. The site was a place of feasting and ritual. The millions of animal bones found in the field are not just garbage. They are the remnants of massive ritual feasts, perhaps the world's first barbecue. In this scenario, the need to feed the hundreds of workers who are building, feasting, and worshiping at this central site is what spurred the invention of agriculture. The cathedral came first, and the need to support it created the first farms in the surrounding valleys. It was a revolution of the mind, not the stomach. And yet, this elegant theory, while it explains the why build it, does not explain the what of the carvings. What was this religion? What did they believe? This has led to a second, far more controversial theory, the star chart of a lost world. This theory argues Göbekli Tepe was not just a temple. It was a sophisticated astronomical observatory, a Rosetta Stone of the sky, built by a humanity far more advanced than we believe. The evidence for this is specific. The central pillars of the main enclosures seem to be aligned, not just to each other, but to the stars. The two central pillars in enclosure D, for example, appear to be oriented toward the setting of the star Deneb in the constellation Cygnus. But the smoking gun of this theory is a single, terrifying carving. Pillar 43, known as the Vulture Stone. At first glance, it is a chaotic scene, a headless man, a large vulture, a scorpion, and various other animals. But proponents of this theory, like engineer Martin Sweatman, argue this is not a picture. It is a date. It is a star map. In this interpretation, the animals are not just animals. They are the Stone Age symbols for constellations. The scorpion is Scorpio. The bent bird is Pisces. The vulture, they argue, represents Sagittarius. And the small, headless man signifies a human disaster. Sweatman's team claims this stone charts the sky at a specific terrible moment, 10,950 BCE. This is the exact date of the Younger Dryas, a cataclysmic 1,200-year-long mini ice age that some scientists believe was triggered by a comet striking the Earth. This theory is staggering. It posits that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were the survivors of this global catastrophe, that the Vulture Stone is a memorial, a warning, a message to the future about a day that the sky fell. It suggests that religion was born from a cosmic trauma. It is a spectacular, thrilling narrative. It is also, for mainstream archaeology, almost total speculation. Is it a star map or just a picture of a vulture and a headless man? Are we seeing their message, or are we just seeing ourselves projecting our own patterns onto their silent stones? This is the great divide. But both theories, the temple and the comet, must ultimately face the second and greater mystery. Why did they bury it? This is the enigma of the burial. Around 8,000 BCE, after 1,500 years of use, the work at Göbekli Tepe did not just stop. It was undone. The site was not conquered. It was not abandoned to the wind. It was, at great and deliberate effort, entombed. The evidence is undeniable. The fill is man-made. The enclosures were filled, one by one, with millions of cubic feet of debris, flint tools, and the bones from those last great feasts. They will fill a ring, and then build a new, smaller one on top, and fill that too. This was a ritual. This act, far more than the construction, is the true mystery. The why is a vortex. The first possibility, a ritual burial. The gods or the beliefs had died. The new world, the world of agriculture and permanent villages, was taking hold. The old ways of the hunter, the gods of the wild, were now obsolete, perhaps even dangerous. The burial was a funeral. They were sealing away their sacred, primitive past to commit to their new future. There was a final respectful goodbye. The second possibility, to protect it. They were burying their sacred site to hide it, to protect it from a new, changing world, or from an invading culture, or from a nature they no longer understood. It was a time capsule sealed for a future, for us, to find. The final and most unsettling possibility. In crisis of faith, the temple had failed. The comet gods or the animal gods had not protected them. The Younger Dryas had happened. The world had changed, and their massive 50-ton effort had been in vain. The burial was not an act of reverence, it was an act of rejection. They were burying their mistake, their false gods, in a final, monumental act of disillusionment. We stand today where Klaus Schmidt stood in 1994, but we are looking not at a hill, but at a question mark, 12,000 years old. We have a cathedral built by people we thought were cavemen. We have a star chart that may, or may not, depict a doomsday. And we have a tomb, buried not with a king, but with an idea. What we have unearthed is, by all estimates, less than 5% of the total site. There are at least 16 more megalithic enclosures, 16 more temples, still sleeping under that potbelly hill, waiting. We are looking at the tip of a submerged 12,000-year-old iceberg. Göbekli Tepe is not a story of collapse like the Maya. It is not a story of invasion like the Indus. It is a story of a choice to build and a choice to bury. The men who carved these stones were not primitive. They possessed a symbolic, spiritual, and astronomical knowledge that we are only just beginning to comprehend. They were the first, and they chose to be the last. And we are left with the ultimate, unsettling silence. The silence of the T-pillars staring at each other in their man-made grave. And the silence of the 1,500-year-old question, what did they see? What did they learn? Or what did they fear that was so powerful, so profound, that it convinced them to turn their backs on their gods and entomb their entire world forever?